The marble courthouse steps seemed to tilt beneath his feet as three identical faces turned toward him. Then the doors burst open, revealing the one man who could destroy everything. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. New York, 2008. The Manhattan skyline glittered against the night sky, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse that Zara Williams shared with Jonathan Blackwood. She sat cross-legged on the balcony, her laptop balanced precariously on her knees as her fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code filling the screen. Occasionally, she glanced up at the city below, still not quite believing that this was her life now. 5 years earlier, Zara had been just another brilliant programmer from the Bronx with enormous potential. Then she met Jonathan Blackwood at a tech conference, heir to one of Wall Street's largest fortunes. Where she saw lines of code, he saw investment opportunities. Where she spoke about algorithms, he countered with market projections. Their worlds couldn't have been more different, yet something sparked between them. "There you are," Jonathan's voice came from behind her. He stepped onto the balcony, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. His tailored suit still looked immaculate despite the late hour. "Working on that little pet project again?" Zara smiled, looking up at him. "It's not just a pet project. This language processing algorithm could revolutionize how machines interpret human commands." "Of course, darling," he replied, his tone indulgent as he pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Just don't forget we have dinner with the Vandermeers tomorrow. Investment opportunities don't create themselves." The Blackwood Enterprises offices occupied 3 entire floors in the heart of Manhattan. Jonathan, as CFO of the family business, enjoyed a respect he'd never had to earn. His imported mahogany desk was always impeccably organized, reflecting the calculating precision with which he conducted both business and personal relationships. Zara remembered how they'd met. Jonathan had been fascinated by her sharp intelligence, while she'd been charmed by his sophisticated demeanor. He'd pursued her relentlessly, and when he proposed after just 8 months, she'd been swept away by the fairy tale of it all. Now, 5 years into their marriage, Zara sat in the waiting room of Dr. Peterson's office, her hands fidgeting in her lap. She checked her phone again. 4 unanswered messages to Jonathan. He'd promised to meet her for this appointment, but had texted last minute about an unavoidable meeting with Japanese investors. "Mrs. Blackwood?" the nurse called, leading her into the examination room. Later, as Dr. Peterson moved the ultrasound wand across Zara's abdomen, the physician's expression shifted from professional to surprised. "Well, this is interesting," she said, adjusting the equipment. "Is something wrong?" Zara asked, anxiety rising in her chest. "Not wrong at all," Dr. Peterson smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Blackwood. You're pregnant. Actually, I'm seeing 3 distinct heartbeats. You're having triplets." Zara's world tilted on its axis. Triplets. 3 babies. She and Jonathan had talked about having children eventually, but they'd never discussed multiples as a possibility. Still, as the initial shock faded, joy bubbled up inside her. She called Jonathan immediately after leaving the office, but only reached his voicemail, again and again. By evening, raindrops streaked down the penthouse windows as Zara paced the living room, rehearsing how to share the news. When she finally heard the elevator doors open, she rushed to the foyer. "Jonathan, I've been trying to reach you all day." He shrugged off his coat, handing it to her without really looking. The Japanese investors were more demanding than expected. Then the board meeting ran long. He loosened his tie as he walked to the bar cart, pouring himself a generous measure of whiskey. "I had my appointment today," Zara reminded him following. "The one you were supposed to attend?" "Ah, yes." He took a long sip. "Everything routine, I assume?" Zara took a deep breath. "Not exactly routine. I'm pregnant." Jonathan froze mid-sip, then carefully lowered his glass. "I see." "There's more," she continued, her hands unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. "It's triplets. We're having 3 babies, Jonathan." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Jonathan's aristocratic features remained perfectly composed as he swirled the whiskey in his glass, the amber liquid catching the light. "Triplets," he finally said, his voice flat. "3 at once." "I know it's a shock. You did this on purpose," he cut in, his voice controlled but sharp as a razor. Zara stepped back as if slapped. "What? 3 children? That would end my career. You know I'm about to become CEO." "Jonathan, how can you say that? We always talked about having children eventually. 1 child, maybe. In the future. Not 3 at once. Not now." His gaze traveled over Zara as if assessing an investment gone wrong. "The timing is suspicious, don't you think? Just as I'm positioned to take over from my father?" Zara felt her throat tighten. "These are our children, Jonathan. Your children." He set his glass down with deliberate care. Perhaps this was a mistake from the beginning. "What are you talking about?" "Us. This marriage." He gestured vaguely between them. "A girl from the Bronx was never going to be enough for someone in my position." The words hit Zara like physical blows. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" His eyes were cold, calculating. "The novelty has worn off, Zara. It was fun. But it's not real. It never was." "Not real?" Zara's voice trembled. 5 years of marriage isn't real. A diversion. My father always said I'd eventually need to settle down with someone appropriate. Someone with the right background, the right connections. And I'm not appropriate. It wasn't a question. You're smart, I'll give you that. But you lack ambition, proper connections, the sophistication necessary for my world. He straightened his cuffs. 3 children would tie me to you permanently. That's what you wanted, isn't it? To trap me? Zara felt something break inside her. "I didn't plan this, Jonathan. But these babies, they're happening. They're real." "That's your choice to make." He picked up his glass again. "But don't expect me to ruin my life for it." 3 weeks later, Zara lay in a hospital bed at Metropolitan Hospital, monitors beeping steadily beside her. Complications had developed in her pregnancy, spotting, cramping, her body struggling to sustain 3 new lives. She'd been admitted for observation and treatment, alone and frightened. When the nurse whispered, "Your husband is here, Mrs. Blackwood," Zara felt a momentary surge of hope. Perhaps Jonathan had reconsidered. Perhaps he'd realized what was truly important. But when the door opened, Jonathan wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit followed him, carrying a leather portfolio. "Let's get this over with quickly," Jonathan said, glancing at his watch. "I have a meeting in an hour." The other man, his lawyer, Zara realized with growing dread, placed papers on the hospital tray table that swung over her bed. "What is this?" she asked, though she already knew. "Divorce papers," Jonathan answered clinically. "By signing these, you receive a one-time payment of $100,000. In exchange, you waive any claim to my assets or properties." Zara stared at him, monitors tracking her accelerating heart rate. "And the babies, Jonathan? Your children? If you insist on having them, that's your problem. I have no interest in children that would destroy everything I've built." He placed a pen on top of the papers. "You are common enough, Zara. Without sufficient ambition, without connections, without the sophistication necessary for my world." With trembling hands, she signed. What choice did she have? Fighting him would mean years of legal battles she couldn't afford, stress that might harm her babies. From the hospital window, she watched Jonathan enter his black Bentley. Before departing, he removed his platinum wedding band and tossed it into the trash can near the entrance, a final gesture of contempt that would be forever etched in Zara's memory. 2 weeks later, Zara stood in the empty living room of a tiny Queens apartment. The security guards at their penthouse had supervised as she collected only personal items, nothing of value. The contrast between the Italian marble of her former home and the cracked linoleum of this place was stark. A mattress on the floor, boxes serving as furniture. She sold the only valuable item she possessed, a diamond necklace Jonathan had given her on their first wedding anniversary to pay the first month's rent and security deposit. The irony wasn't lost on her, the symbol of his supposed love now funding her escape from his cruelty. As night fell, Zara stood by the window of her new apartment, one hand resting protectively on her growing belly, looking out at the distant Manhattan skyline. The lights of the skyscrapers twinkled like cold, distant stars. "Boston, Memphis, Dallas," she whispered, having already chosen their names. "American cities of resilience and reinvention. We're going to show him who's too common. One day, we'll look down on him from so high up he'll need binoculars to see us." That night, curled up on her bare mattress in the Italian marble bathroom that now felt like a gilded prison, Zara couldn't imagine that 15 years later she would be standing in the center of Manhattan, commanding a technological empire that would make Blackwood Enterprises seem insignificant. 3 weeks passed in a blur of morning sickness and silent tears. Zara's pregnancy symptoms intensified, her body working overtime to nurture 3 growing lives within her. The hollow emptiness of the Queen's apartment matched the void in her chest where her heart used to be. Each night she would whisper reassurances to her unborn children, promises of love and protection that stood in stark contrast to the betrayal she'd experienced. The cramping started on a Tuesday morning, subtle at first, then increasingly insistent. By afternoon, spotting appeared, and panic seized Zara's chest. A neighbor drove her to Metropolitan Hospital, where the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like persistent insects as doctors rushed to stabilize her precarious pregnancy. "Bed rest, Mrs. Blackwood," Dr. Chen instructed, her face etched with concern. "Your body is struggling to sustain all 3 fetuses. The stress isn't helping." Zara nodded numbly, one hand protectively cradling her stomach. Stress. If only the doctor knew the half of it. The hospital room was Spartan but clean, the rhythmic beeping of monitors her constant companions. For 2 days, Zara lay alone, making calls to cancel the few cleaning jobs she'd managed to secure, calculating how quickly her meager savings would evaporate with each passing day. On the 3rd morning, the nurse poked her head in, expression unusually bright. "Your husband is here, Mrs. Blackwood." For one treacherous moment, hope flickered in Zara's chest. Perhaps Jonathan had reconsidered. Perhaps seeing her hospitalized had awakened something human in him. The door swung open. Jonathan entered, impeccable in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months' rent for her new apartment. But he wasn't alone. Behind him walked an older man carrying a leather portfolio, his expression professionally neutral. "Let's make this quick," Jonathan said by way of greeting, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "I have a meeting with the board in an hour." "No hello? No how are you? No are the babies okay?" "This is Mr. Harrison, my attorney," Jonathan continued, gesturing to his companion who nodded curtly. The lawyer opened his portfolio on the rolling tray table and extracted a thick document. "These are dissolution of marriage papers, Mrs. Blackwood." Zara stared at the documents, then at Jonathan, searching his face for any trace of the man she thought she'd married. His features remained impassive, as if this were merely another business transaction. "You're serving me divorce papers? Here? Now?" Her voice cracked, the monitors beside her bed registering her accelerated heart rate. "It's cleaner this way," Jonathan replied methodically. "By signing these documents, you receive a one-time payment of $100,000. In exchange, you waive any claims to my assets, properties, or future earnings." The clinical way he outlined the destruction of their marriage made Zara feel physically ill. "And what about the babies, Jonathan? Your children?" Something flickered in his eyes, not compassion, but annoyance. "If you insist on having them, that's your decision. I've made mine clear." "These are your children," Zara repeated, her voice stronger. "Your flesh and blood. I have no interest in children that would destroy everything I've built." He placed a Mont Blanc pen atop the papers. "The timing is suspicious at best, Zara. 3 babies just as I'm positioned to become CEO? The board would never approve. Tears welled in her eyes. Is that all that matters to you? Your career? Your image? What did you expect? His voice remained steady, detached. You're common enough, Zara, without sufficient ambition, without connections, without the sophistication necessary for my world. Each word landed like a physical blow. Zara clutched the thin hospital blanket, knuckles white. The alternative is a protracted legal battle, the lawyer interjected smoothly. Mr. Blackwood is being generous with the settlement offer, considering the brevity of the marriage and the prenuptial agreement you signed. Zara remembered that prenup, how she'd signed it without reading the fine print, believing that love would make such documents irrelevant. How naive she'd been. With trembling hands, she took the pen. What choice did she have? Fighting Jonathan would mean years of legal battles she couldn't afford, stress that would endanger her babies. $100,000 seemed like a fortune now, though she knew it would evaporate quickly with 3 children to raise. Page after page, she signed away the life she thought she'd have. The funds will be transferred within 5 business days, the lawyer said, gathering the signed documents. You'll need to vacate the penthouse by the end of the week. I already have, Zara said quietly. Something like surprise flickered across Jonathan's face, the first genuine emotion he'd displayed. Well, that's efficient. He straightened his cuffs, an unconscious habit when concluding business. I'll be traveling to Tokyo for the next month. Harrison will handle any further communication. He turned to leave without another word of farewell. Zara shifted in the bed, wincing at the movement. Jonathan. He paused at the doorway, not quite turning back. One day, she said softly, you'll regret this moment more than anything in your life. A dismissive shrug was his only response before he disappeared through the doorway. From her hospital bed, Zara could see through the window to the hospital entrance below. Jonathan emerged, walking briskly toward his waiting Bentley, the chauffeur holding the door open. Just before stepping in, he paused, removing something from his finger. The platinum wedding band caught the afternoon sunlight as it arced through the air, landing in the trash can positioned near the entrance. The finality of that gesture, tossing away their marriage like so much garbage, burned itself into Zara's memory. 3 days later, doctors discharged Zara with strict instructions for managing her high-risk pregnancy. She took a taxi to her new apartment in Queens, the driver helping her with the single bag containing her hospital belongings. The contrast between the penthouse she'd shared with Jonathan and this place was stark. Approximately 700 square feet with cracked linoleum floors, water stains on the ceiling, and a perpetual draft from windows that didn't quite seal. The building itself was in a neighborhood that rarely saw Bentleys or chauffeurs, working-class families, elderly residents on fixed incomes, and young singles sharing spaces to afford the rent. Zara had managed to furnish it with only the essentials: a mattress on the floor, a second-hand table with mismatched chairs, a single pot and pan for cooking. Boxes served as nightstands and additional seating. The settlement money hadn't arrived yet, and the small amount she'd saved from her programming jobs before marriage was rapidly dwindling. That evening, Zara sat on her mattress, sorting through the few personal items she'd taken from the penthouse. Security guards had supervised her collection, ensuring she took nothing valuable, as if the photos, books, and mementos that mattered to her had any significant monetary worth. Among her belongings was the diamond necklace Jonathan had given her on their first anniversary, an exquisite piece featuring a 2-carat central stone surrounded by smaller diamonds in a platinum setting. At the time, she'd been overwhelmed by its beauty and what she thought it represented. Now it felt like a collar, a symbol of ownership rather than love. The next morning, Zara visited a jewelry store in Manhattan, far from the high-end establishments Jonathan frequented. The appraiser's eyes widened slightly at the quality of the piece, but he offered less than half its retail value, Still enough to cover the first month's rent, security deposit, and essential furnishings for the babies. "Are you sure, ma'am?" he asked, perhaps noting her pregnant state and the worn edges of her coat. "This is a very fine piece." "I'm sure," Zara replied, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. "Some things are worth more than diamonds." In the following days, Zara transformed the apartment's second bedroom into a space for the triplets. Second-hand cribs, carefully sanitized, donated baby clothes, washed and folded with care, a rocking chair rescued from a sidewalk, sanded and repainted in cheerful yellow. Each item represented hours of work, determination solidifying within her with every passing day. As night fell, Zara stood by the window of her apartment, one hand resting protectively on her growing belly. From this vantage point in Queens, the Manhattan skyline was visible in the distance, glittering towers reaching toward the heavens, Jonathan's world of wealth and privilege. "We don't need him," she whispered to her unborn children. "We're going to build something better, something real." While contemplating the gray Queens skyline, Zara couldn't predict that in just 15 years, she would own an entire skyscraper in that same Manhattan horizon, with the name Williams shining where everyone, especially Jonathan Blackwood, could see. The skies opened up in a frigid February downpour as Zara's water broke, 3 months before her due date. Pain seared through her abdomen with an intensity that stole her breath. She fumbled for her phone, fingers slick with sweat, and called the only person she could think of, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Guzman. "Coming, mija," the woman promised, her accent thick with worry. By the time the ambulance arrived, Zara was drifting in and out of consciousness, her body fighting to hold on to the 3 lives within her for just a little longer. The paramedics worked with practiced efficiency, their voices distant through the haze of her pain. Triplets, 28 weeks, blood pressure dropping. The emergency room erupted into controlled chaos as Zara was wheeled in. Doctors in scrubs converged around her, barking orders as nurses attached monitors and inserted IVs. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast everything in a sterile, unforgiving glow. "We need to perform an emergency C-section," a surgeon explained, her eyes serious above her mask. "Your babies are in distress." Zara nodded weakly, tears streaming down her temples. "Save them," she whispered. "Please save my babies." In the operating room, machines beeped frantically as Zara's vitals fluctuated. The surgical team moved with urgent precision, and within minutes, cries, tiny, fragile, but determined, filled the room. "Baby A, male, 1 pound, 11 ounces, called out a nurse. "Baby B, male, 1 pound, 9 ounces. Baby C, male, 1 pound, 10 ounces. They were whisked away immediately to waiting incubators, their tiny bodies a web of tubes and wires. When Zara awoke hours later in recovery, a neonatal specialist stood by her bed, his expression grave but not hopeless. "Your sons are fighters, Mrs. Williams," he said, noting her correction when she'd been admitted under her maiden name. "The next 72 hours will be critical." For 3 days, Zara barely left the NICU. She sat beside the incubators, her hand inside the small openings, a single finger gently touching each baby's palm. Their skin was translucent, revealing blue veins beneath, their chests rising and falling with each assisted breath. "Boston," she whispered to the firstborn. "Memphis, to the second. Dallas, to the third. Fight, my little ones. Your mama is right here." The nurses taught her kangaroo care, holding the fragile infants against her bare chest, skin to skin for hours. Research showed it improved outcomes for preemies. Zara would alternate between the 3, whispering stories and promises into their tiny ears. "We're going to prove him wrong," she told them during these intimate moments. "All of us, together." Days turned into weeks. The boys gained ounces with agonizing slowness. There were setbacks, infections, breathing complications, feeding difficulties. Each time, Zara felt her heart might shatter, but the babies persevered. Their determination seemed to mirror her own growing resolve. After 61 days in the NICU, the discharge date finally arrived. Zara had spent every moment learning from the nurses how to manage the apnea monitors, administer medications, recognize warning signs. "You're unusually prepared," remarked Dr. Patel during the final consultation. "Most first-time parents are terrified to take home one newborn, let alone 3 preemies." Zara smiled tiredly. "I don't have the luxury of being terrified." Reality hit hard when a hospital social worker approached her about the mounting bills. Insurance had covered some costs, but the deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses were astronomical. With trembling hands, Zara signed up for a payment plan, knowing it would take years to clear the debt. The day Zara brought her sons home, she realized she hadn't fully considered the logistics. How would she carry 3 infant car seats by herself? A nurse noticed her predicament in the hospital parking lot and called over an orderly to help. "You doing this alone?" the orderly asked without judgment. Zara nodded. "Just us 4 against the world." Her Queen's apartment now held 3 second-hand cribs arranged in a triangle so she could see all babies from any position. A changing table, actually a dresser with a pad secured on top, stood near the window. Diapers, donated by a local church group, were stacked nearly to the ceiling in one corner. The boys' medical needs dictated a brutal schedule. Every 3 hours around the clock, they needed to be fed, changed, and medicated. Boston had reflux issues, Memphis needed extra respiratory treatments, and Dallas was still struggling to maintain his body temperature. Between caring for them, Zara snatched moments of sleep in 20-minute increments. By the time the triplets were 4 months old, 1 month adjusted age, Zara's settlement money had dwindled alarmingly. The hospital payment plan consumed most of what remained. She had to find income, but childcare for 3 medically fragile infants would cost more than most entry-level positions paid. She started small, cooking Caribbean dishes from her grandmother's recipes and selling them to neighbors and local construction workers. The spicy patties and stewed chicken brought in just enough for groceries and diapers. Next, she took on data entry work she could do at night while the boys slept. Hunched over her aging laptop, she worked until her vision blurred, catching an hour of sleep before the next feeding cycle began. When the boys reached 6 months, Zara added weekend house cleaning to her repertoire of jobs. She would strap the triplets into a second-hand triple stroller and walk to nearby homes, bringing along a portable playpen where they could stay while she scrubbed floors and bathrooms. The harsh chemicals chapped her hands until they cracked and bled, but she wore gloves and kept working. "You were right about one thing, Jonathan," she muttered one night, applying ointment to her raw hands. "I didn't have ambition before, but I do now." Winter arrived with brutal force. The apartment's inadequate heating meant bundling the boys in layers, while Zara often went without to ensure they stayed warm. A particularly vicious cold snap coincided with all 3 babies developing ear infections. The pediatrician visits, medications, and missed work depleted her emergency fund. It was in this moment of desperation that Zara found herself standing in line at the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program office. The triplets were strapped to her chest and back in carriers, all fussy from their infections. She kept her eyes down, shame burning through her despite knowing she had nothing to be ashamed of. "Zara? Zara Williams, is that you?" The voice cut through the ambient noise of the government office. Zara looked up to see Adrienne Vasquez, a former colleague from her days as a junior programmer at Tech Solutions. "My God, what happened to you?" Adrienne continued, her designer handbag and immaculate appearance a stark contrast to Zara's worn clothes and exhausted face. "Didn't you marry that rich guy from Blackwood Enterprises?" Zara swallowed hard, conscious of curious eyes turning toward them. "Things change," she said simply. "These are all yours?" Adrienne peered at the sleeping infants. "Triplets? Wow." The conversation that followed was excruciating. Zara explained her situation in the briefest terms possible, watching Adrienne's expression shift from shock to pity, the latter far more difficult to stomach. You know, I still have contacts at Bright Tech, Adrienne offered, her tone tinged with condescension. I could see if they have something you could do remotely. Nothing major, but maybe some basic coding work? The pity in her former colleague's eyes stirred something in Zara. Not gratitude, but a fierce, burning determination. She accepted Adrienne's business card with a polite thank you, but inside, something fundamental had shifted. That night, after settling the triplets in their cribs, Zara stood in the center of her small apartment, surveying the evidence of her struggle: the stained carpet, the mismatched furniture, the stack of medical bills. But instead of defeat, she felt a strange clarity descending. She moved to each crib, gently touching each boy's cheek. "Boston, Memphis, Dallas," she whispered, "I promise you this. We will never again need anyone's pity. One day, the world will know who we are, and Jonathan Blackwood will regret every word he said, every promise he broke." The next morning, with the babies secured in their triple stroller, Zara entered the public library. While they napped, she installed herself at a computer terminal and began researching. Not jobs, not assistance programs, but something else entirely: venture capital funding for tech startups, patent applications, and the emerging market for natural language processing algorithms. She pulled from her bag a worn notebook containing ideas she'd sketched during her marriage. The hobby without importance Jonathan had dismissed. As the boys slept peacefully beside her, Zara began typing furiously, the outline of a business plan taking shape on the screen. "Mommy's going to show the world what a girl from the Bronx can really do," she promised, kissing each of their foreheads as they slumbered. That night, while the triplets finally slept in perfect synchrony, Zara powered up her old laptop and began writing the code that, unbeknownst to her, would become the foundation of a billion-dollar technological empire. The glow of the laptop screen illuminated Zara's exhausted face as her fingers danced across the keyboard. Lines of code filled the screen, the foundation of an algorithm that had taken shape in her mind during sleepless nights. Outside the window of her Queens apartment, the first anniversary of the triplets' birth approached, marked by the melting snow of early February. Boston stirred in his crib, his tiny whimpers quickly escalating to cries that woke his brothers. Zara sighed, saving her work before closing the laptop. 1 year had transformed her babies from fragile preemies to robust, curious toddlers who consumed every ounce of her energy during daylight hours. "Coming, my loves," she murmured, lifting Boston first. His brothers, now fully awake, stood gripping the rails of their cribs, faces brightening at the sight of their mother. The morning routine had become a choreographed dance: diaper changes, breakfast preparation, and cleanup executed with military precision. By 8:30, Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 3B arrived to watch the boys while Zara worked her day shift at Marino's Deli 6 blocks away. "They're growing so fast," Mrs. Rodriguez remarked, accepting the handwritten schedule of feeding times and medication doses. "Boston tried to say book yesterday." Zara's face lit up despite her exhaustion. "He did? Show me later, mijo," she said, kissing Boston's forehead before repeating the gesture with Memphis and Dallas. "Mommy will be back before you know it." The February wind cut through her thin coat as she hurried to the deli. 8 hours of making sandwiches, operating the register, and cleaning tables would earn her enough to cover tomorrow's diapers and formula. The data entry work she did at night paid the rent. Weekend house cleaning jobs covered utilities and the ongoing hospital payment plan. Every moment in between belonged to her secret project. That evening, after the triplets finally surrendered to sleep, Zara returned to her laptop. The algorithm taking shape was her answer to a question that had obsessed her during her marriage. How could machines better understand the nuances of human language? Jonathan had dismissed it as a hobby without importance, but Zara saw potential that he'd been too arrogant to recognize. Her eyelids grew heavy around 2 in the morning. She fought against sleep, desperate to complete a particularly complex section of code. Eventually her head drooped, cheek pressing against the keyboard as exhaustion claimed her. She woke with a start at 5:30, her neck stiff and screen filled with nonsensical characters from where her face had rested. Panic seized her as she realized the section she'd been working on hadn't been saved. "No, no, no," she whispered frantically, scrolling through the document. Hours of work potentially lost. Her eyes burned with unshed tears as she initiated the recovery program, a last desperate attempt to retrieve the unsaved changes. The loading bar crawled across the screen with excruciating slowness. From the bedroom she heard the first stirrings of the triplets. She had perhaps 5 minutes before their day officially began. When the recovery program completed with a soft chime revealing the restored file, Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The code was intact. Quickly saving multiple backups, she closed the laptop just as Memphis called out, "Mama!" from the bedroom. The following Saturday, Zara bundled the triplets into their stroller and headed to the local public library. While they explored board books in the children's section under the watchful eye of a friendly librarian, Zara installed herself at a computer terminal, researching emerging technologies in natural language processing. Academic papers scrolled across her screen, most hidden behind paywalls she couldn't afford to breach. Undeterred, she scoured open-source repositories and tech forums, piecing together information from fragments, building a comprehensive understanding of the current landscape. "Excuse me," a voice interrupted her concentration. "Your little ones are quite remarkable." Zara looked up to see an elderly gentleman with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, gesturing toward the triplets who were stacking blocks with surprising coordination. "Thank you," she replied, instinctively scanning for any signs of trouble. "I couldn't help noticing what you're researching," he continued. "Computational linguistics is a special interest of mine. I taught at Columbia for 30 years. Their conversation revealed that Dr. Howard Chen was a retired professor of computer science who now volunteered at the library twice weekly. When Zara cautiously explained her algorithm concept, his eyes widened with genuine interest. "You've identified a significant gap in current processing models," he noted after she sketched her approach on a scrap of paper. "Have you considered applying for a patent?" Zara laughed softly. "Patents require money, Dr. Chen, and lawyers. I have neither." "Perhaps," he replied thoughtfully, "but you have something more valuable, a truly innovative idea. And as it happens, I know several people who might be interested in hearing more." 2 weeks later, Zara sat nervously in a small coffee shop, the triplets remarkably well-behaved in their stroller beside her. Across the table, Stephen Lin, an angel investor Dr. Chen had introduced, reviewed the primitive prototype she'd managed to build. "So the system doesn't just recognize keywords," Lin clarified. "It actually interprets contextual meaning based on sentence structure and historical patterns." Zara nodded, fighting to maintain professional composure despite the sleep deprivation clouding her thoughts. "Exactly. Current systems fail because they process language mechanically. My algorithm learns from interactions, improving its understanding over time." Lin tested the prototype with increasingly complex queries, his eyebrows rising as the system correctly interpreted ambiguous requests. When Dallas began fussing, Zara reflexively reached into the stroller, offering a pacifier without breaking her explanation of the code architecture. "Most developers I meet can barely manage their coffee consumption, let alone triplets," Lin remarked with a smile. "Your multitasking skills are impressive." "Necessity," Zara replied simply. Lin closed her laptop, studying her with newfound respect. "This is remarkable, Mrs. Williams. I'm willing to invest $50,000 to see where we can take this." The words didn't immediately register. "I'm sorry, what?" $50,000 for a 20% stake in whatever you're building." He reached into his briefcase, extracting paperwork. "We'll need to formalize things, of course, but I recognize potential when I see it." That night, Zara danced around her tiny apartment, swinging each giggling toddler in turn. "We did it! We did it!" she sang, their small arms wrapped around her neck. When they finally slept, she sat on the edge of her bed, tears streaming down her face, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming relief of the first step toward genuine change. Her last day at Marino's Deli came 2 weeks later. Mr. Marino, the owner, seemed genuinely sad to see her go. "You're my best worker, Zara," he said, pressing an envelope containing her final pay plus a small bonus into her hand. "If this tech thing doesn't work out, you always have a place here." "Thank you," she replied, knowing she would never return. The determination burning inside her would accept nothing less than complete success. With Lynn's investment secured, Zara began the search for affordable commercial space. She found it in a rundown building in Brooklyn. A single room with water stains on the ceiling and questionable wiring, but the rent was manageable and the location accessible by public transportation. The day she signed the lease, a surprising sense of ceremony overtook her. This small, imperfect space represented the first real step toward building something that was entirely hers. She spent a weekend transforming the office, scrubbing floors, painting walls, installing second-hand furniture purchased from a business liquidation sale. In one corner, she created a safe area for the triplets, colorful carpet tiles, educational toys, and a secure playpen where they could stay while she worked. A small desktop computer, significantly more powerful than her laptop, became the centerpiece of her workspace. With trembling fingers, she taped a hand-lettered sign to the door, "William Steck, Natural Language Processing Solutions." On Monday morning, Zara stood before the door, keys in hand, the triplets secured in their stroller. Taking a deep breath, she unlocked her future. "This is it, boys," she said, pushing the stroller inside. "Our new beginning." Boston clapped his hands, Memphis bounced excitedly, and Dallas pointed at the computer, already drawn to the glowing screen. As she arranged her modest one-room office, with the triplets playing in the improvised playpen in the corner, Zara couldn't imagine that in 10 years she would be conducting meetings in a conference room larger than the entire apartment where her sons were born. 3 years passed like a blur of sleepless nights, tiny milestones, and relentless work. The Williams Tech office had evolved from a single room with water stains to a modest suite with actual walls, windows that didn't leak, and chairs that matched. Zara had hired 3 people: Kevin, a brilliant programmer with social anxiety who preferred code to conversation; Maya, an administrative assistant whose organizational skills bordered on supernatural; and Raj, an eager computer science student who interned between classes. The triplets, now 4 years old, had outgrown their playpen corner. Their developmental leaps stunned everyone who met them. Where most 4-year-olds built simple block towers, Boston, Memphis, and Dallas constructed elaborate structures with mathematical precision. Their language skills had advanced far beyond their peers, with Dallas already reading at a second-grade level. On this particular Monday morning, Zara reviewed her presentation one final time. MidCorp, a mid-sized customer service company with 500 employees, represented her first potential corporate client. After months of cold calls and rejected proposals, their operations director had finally agreed to a meeting. "You've got this," Maya said, straightening papers on Zara's desk. "Your system blows the competition away." Zara smiled tightly, checking her reflection in the small mirror she kept in her drawer. The woman looking back at her had changed from the broken figure who'd once slept on a mattress on the floor. Her hair was neatly styled, her second-hand blazer carefully tailored to hide its previous life. But shadows still lingered beneath her eyes, testament to nights spent coding after putting the boys to bed. "Memphis has a doctor's appointment at 4, she reminded Maya. "If I'm not back, I'll take him. Stop worrying," Maya insisted. "Focus on landing this client." The MidCorp headquarters occupied 3 floors of a respectable building in Midtown, not the gleaming skyscrapers of Jonathan's world, but a significant step up from the businesses Zara usually pitched to. In the conference room, 5 executives in expensive suits watched with varying degrees of skepticism as Zara connected her laptop to the projector. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach, "your customer service representatives handle approximately 12,000 calls daily. Our algorithm can reduce your response time by 40% while improving accuracy by 37%. The oldest executive, gray-haired with shrewd eyes, leaned forward. "Bold claims, Ms. Williams, especially from a company I've never heard of." "Fair assessment, Mr. Garrett," Zara acknowledged, "which is why I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking for 2 months to prove it works." She launched the demonstration, guiding them through the system's capabilities. As questions grew more technical, she answered with increasing confidence, her deep understanding of the code evident in every explanation. By meeting's end, Garrett's skepticism had transformed into cautious interest. "You have 2 months to prove this works as advertised," he said, extending his hand. "If it does, we'll discuss a broader implementation." As the elevator descended to the lobby, Zara allowed herself a brief moment of triumph. Not a definitive victory yet, but a foot in the door that had seemed firmly closed just hours earlier. The following weeks passed in a frenzy of preparation. The mid-corp implementation required customization beyond what Zara had anticipated. The system needed to integrate with their existing database, recognize industry-specific terminology, and process multiple accents seamlessly. 2 weeks before the final demonstration, disaster struck. During preliminary testing, the algorithm crashed when handling multiple simultaneous queries, precisely the scenario Midcorp would require. "This is bad," Kevin muttered, staring at the error messages flooding the screen. "Really bad." Zara ran her hands through her hair, mind racing. "We need to rebuild the query handling module from scratch." "That's at least a week of work," Raj calculated, "and we'd need to test it thoroughly." "Then we'd better get started," Zara said, pulling out her phone to call Mrs. Rodriguez. That night, Zara transformed the office into a temporary living space. Air mattresses for the triplets, a coffee maker programmed to brew every 4 hours, and enough snacks to survive a minor apocalypse. "Adventure camping," she told the boys, making it sound like a treat rather than a necessity. They adapted with the resilience that continually amazed her. Memphis helped arrange their sleeping bags in a neat row. Dallas brought books to read during breaks. Boston, always the most perceptive, simply hugged her and whispered, "We'll help you win, Mommy." For 3 days, the pattern remained the same: code until exhaustion, sleep for 3 hours, wake to continue. Mrs. Rodriguez brought homemade meals, clucking disapprovingly at Zara's exhausted face but understanding the stakes. "Your children are proud of you," the older woman said on the second evening, watching the boys play quietly with educational tablets. "They tell everyone their mama makes computers talk." On the third night, with progress still alarmingly slow, Zara fought to keep her eyes open. The lines of code blurred before her, symbols dancing meaninglessly across the screen. "Mama?" Boston's small voice startled her. He stood beside her chair, pajama-clad and serious. "Can I see?" Too tired to refuse, Zara lifted him onto her lap. His eyes scanned the code with surprising focus for a 4-year-old. "What's this part do?" he asked, pointing to a section of the processing algorithm. Zara explained in simplified terms, not expecting him to understand. To her astonishment, Boston frowned thoughtfully. "What if you make it smaller?" "Make what smaller, sweetie?" "These groups," he said, touching the screen where data packets were defined. "Too big. Makes it slow." Zara stared at her son, then back at the code. With a child's uninhibited thinking, Boston had identified precisely what she'd overlooked. The system was choking on oversized data packets. Working through the night with renewed energy, Zara restructured the module using Boston's insight. By morning, the algorithm processed multiple queries without a hitch. "My son, the programming prodigy," she murmured, kissing his sleeping forehead. The final presentation to Midcorp arrived with stomach-churning speed. Zara stood before their executive team in her only professional suit, outwardly composed despite running on minimal sleep and maximum caffeine. "Over the past 2 months," she began, "we've integrated our system with your existing platform and trained it on 60,000 of your historical customer interactions." As she demonstrated the results, response times cut by 43%, accuracy improved by 41%, the skepticism in the room gradually transformed into impressed nods. "The numbers speak for themselves," Garrett acknowledged after the presentation. "We'd like to implement the system company-wide." The contract they offered was 3 times larger than Zara had dared hope for. When she returned to the office, the celebration was modest but heartfelt. Cheap champagne for the adults, grape juice in plastic cups for the triplets. "To Williams Tech," Kevin proposed, raising his cup, "and to the boss who never gives up." With the Midcorp payment secured, Zara finally visited the apartment she'd been eyeing for weeks. A 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with actual separation between living spaces, not just the partitioned corners they'd managed with before. "What do you think?" she asked as the triplets explored the space, their excited voices echoing in rooms that seemed palatial after their current cramped quarters. "Our own room, Mama!" Memphis exclaimed, bouncing on the spot. "And look," Dallas added, running to the window, "there's a park right there." Boston, always the quiet observer, walked to Zara and took her hand. "Is this really ours?" "Yes, mijo," she answered, throat tight with emotion. "This is really ours." The following weekend, they visited the boys' potential new school. The building wasn't the gleaming private academy Zara someday hoped for, but it was clean, well-staffed, and most importantly, had resources their current overcrowded public school lacked. "They have computers in the classroom," Dallas noted with wide eyes. The registration process was streamlined by the boys' exceptional test scores. The principal herself made time to meet them, visibly impressed by their articulate responses and advanced reasoning. As Zara watched her sons explore their new environment with confident curiosity, a profound sense of progress washed over her. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were beginning to thrive. Moving day arrived with unexpected emotion. Their old apartment, for all its flaws, had sheltered them during their most vulnerable time. Zara stood in the empty living room, remembering the mattress on the floor, the makeshift cribs, the desperate nights and determined mornings. "Ready, Mama?" Memphis called from the doorway, his small backpack stuffed with treasured possessions. "Ready," she confirmed, closing the door on their past. That night, as the triplets slept in their own room for the first time, Zara couldn't predict that in just 7 years, not just one company but an entire conglomerate would bear the Williams name, or that her sons would be courted by elite universities long before they reached adolescence. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the new apartment, casting golden rectangles on the floor where the triplets played. 3 years had transformed both their living situation and Zara's business beyond recognition. At 7 years old, Boston, Memphis, and Dallas were no longer the vulnerable toddlers who had once shared a playpen in a one-room office, but confident young boys with distinct personalities and extraordinary minds. The Williams Tech headquarters now occupied an entire floor in a respectable office building near Union Square. 25 employees worked under Zara's direction, each carefully selected not just for their technical brilliance but for their belief in her vision. The company's proprietary natural language processing algorithm had evolved from a promising prototype into a sophisticated system that attracted increasing industry attention. Zara stood in her kitchen preparing breakfast while reviewing quarterly projections on her tablet. The Midcorp contract had led to referrals, which led to smaller implementations, which built a portfolio of successes that could no longer be ignored. But today's meeting would dwarf all previous opportunities. "Boys, breakfast in 5 minutes," she called, sliding freshly cut fruit into 3 identical bowls. They appeared with the coordinated chaos that characterized their movements. Boston with a book under his arm, Memphis straightening his already perfect collar, Dallas explaining something with animated hand gestures. "Mom, did you know the probability of triplets naturally is approximately 1 in 8,000? Dallas asked, climbing onto his chair. "I did know that." Zara smiled, setting their breakfast before them. "We beat the odds." "We always do," Boston replied with a seriousness beyond his years. After dropping the boys at school, Zara headed to the most important meeting of her career. Voice Assist Corporation, one of the leading virtual assistant platforms, had expressed interest in licensing Williams Tech's algorithm for their next-generation product. The potential deal, $1 million. In the sleek conference room of Voice Assist's Manhattan headquarters, Zara presented with a confidence that betrayed none of her inner nervousness. Her presentation materials were impeccable, her responses to technical questions precise and articulate. 3 hours and 2 rounds of negotiations later, she emerged with a signed contract. In the privacy of the elevator, Zara pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle a sound that was half laugh, half sob. $1 million. The number seemed surreal, impossible. Her first thought wasn't about what to buy or how to celebrate. It was about her sons. "Ms. Williams, are you all right?" asked the receptionist as Zara fumbled with her phone in the lobby. "Yes, I need to call my children's school," she managed, fingers trembling as she dialed. When the school secretary put the call through to the boys' classroom, Zara could barely contain herself. "We did it," she whispered when the triplets came on the speakerphone. "Mom landed the Voice Assist contract." Their cheers, even through the tiny phone speaker, filled her with more pride than the contract itself. That night, Zara sat cross-legged on her bed, spreadsheets open on her laptop as she calculated what this meant for their future. The money would be transformative, allowing for company expansion, a proper apartment in Manhattan, and most importantly, the best education possible for the boys. 2 months later, Zara stood in the spacious living room of their new home, a 3-bedroom apartment in a doorman building on the Upper West Side. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating hardwood floors and fresh white walls waiting to be filled with memories. "This is ours?" Memphis asked, his voice hushed with disbelief as he ran his hand along the smooth countertop in the kitchen. "All ours," Zara confirmed, watching as her sons explored their new territory. Boston discovered the bookshelves first, built into the wall of what would become their shared bedroom. "Mom, look how many books we can fit!" Dallas went straight for the windows, pressing his face against the glass. "We can see the park from here." The contrast between this spacious, light-filled apartment and the cramped queen's space they'd first called home was stark. As the boys raced from room to room, Zara allowed herself a moment of reflection. The girl from the Bronx, who had once been told she lacked sufficient ambition, now stood in her Manhattan apartment, watching her sons thrive. The Westbrook Preparatory School occupied a stately building on the Upper East Side. With its ivy-covered brick exterior and reputation for academic excellence, it represented exactly the kind of opportunity Zara wanted for her sons. The tuition was exorbitant, but the Voice Assist money made it possible. "Your children will need to take admissions tests, Mrs. Williams," the stern-faced admissions director explained during their tour. "Westbrook maintains the highest standards, and mid-year transfers are unusual." Zara nodded, watching as the triplets observed a science demonstration in a passing classroom, their eyes alight with curiosity. "They'll be ready." 3 days later, her phone rang as she was leaving a client meeting. "Mrs. Williams, this is Headmaster Branford from Westbrook. I'm calling personally because, well, there's no precedent for the test results your sons achieved." "Is there a problem?" Zara asked, heart sinking. "Quite the opposite. In my 30 years in education, I've never seen scores this high from applicants their age. We would be honored to welcome them for the spring semester." As winter melted into spring, the boys settled into their new school while Williams Tech continued its upward trajectory. Zara's reputation grew alongside her company, culminating in an unexpected email from the editor of Tech Innovators magazine. "We'd like to feature you on our cover," the message read. "Our theme is Unlikely Innovators, and your journey from single mother to tech entrepreneur embodies this perfectly." The photo shoot took place in the Williams Tech offices. Zara, uncomfortable with the attention but recognizing the value of publicity, stood awkwardly as the photographer arranged and rearranged her against the backdrop of screens displaying her algorithm. "Try to look more relaxed," the photographer suggested. "That's asking a lot," Zara replied with a small laugh. "I'm a programmer, not a model." The resulting image captured something the photographer hadn't staged, a quiet determination in her eyes that spoke louder than any pose could have. When the magazine hit newsstands a month later, the headline read, "How a Single Mother of Triplets Built One of New York's Most Promising Tech Startups." The article detailed her journey without mentioning Jonathan by name, referring only to personal challenges that had left her alone with 3 newborns. The response was immediate: interview requests, speaking invitations, and most importantly, serious interest from larger potential clients. As their lives transformed, Zara watched her sons develop their own remarkable talents. Boston, always the thinker, stayed after school for a coding class designed for middle schoolers. One evening, he presented Zara with his first application. "It helps organize tasks, Mom," he explained, demonstrating on her phone, "like you always do in your notebooks." Zara marveled at the simple but effective interface designed by a 7-year-old who had inherited her instinct for elegant solutions. Memphis discovered robotics through a school competition, his dexterous hands and spatial reasoning making him a natural. When he won first place in a citywide mathematics contest, beating students twice his age, his teacher called Zara personally. "I've never seen anyone solve those equations so quickly," the woman said, awe evident in her voice. "Memphis has a gift." Dallas, with his encyclopedic memory and analytical mind, became known for spouting scientific facts during dinner, causing the whole family to erupt in laughter at his earnest explanations. "Did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts?" he announced one evening over pasta. "Just like Mom," Boston replied thoughtfully. "1 heart for each of us." Despite Williams Tech's expansion and her increasingly demanding schedule, Zara established one unbreakable rule: Sundays belonged to her sons. No meetings, no calls, no exceptions. This sacred time became their tradition. Museums, parks, movies, or simply building elaborate blanket forts in their living room. When her new VP of Operations tried to schedule an emergency meeting on a Sunday, Zara's response was unequivocal. "Sundays belong to my children. We can reconvene Monday morning." "But the Singapore clients will still be there on Monday," she finished firmly. "Some things are non-negotiable." That Sunday, as Manhattan's elite conducted business brunches and working weekends, Zara and her sons constructed an elaborate fort of blankets and chairs in their living room. Inside this temporary castle, they shared stories, dreams, and plans for the future. "When I grow up," Memphis declared, "I'm going to build robots that help people. I'm going to discover something no one has ever seen before," Dallas added, eyes wide with possibility. Boston, thoughtful as always, leaned against Zara's shoulder. "I'm going to make something that changes everything, like you did, Mom." As the 4 of them drifted to sleep together in their blanket fortress, their lives transformed almost beyond recognition in just 7 years. None of them could imagine that one day the Williams name would appear in giant letters atop a Manhattan skyscraper, visible from the windows of the office where Jonathan Blackwood continued his stagnant career. The sleek helicopter sliced through Manhattan's morning air, its rhythmic thrum a stark contrast to the silence inside the cabin. Zara gazed through the window at the glittering forest of skyscrapers below, mentally cataloging potential locations for Williams Tech's new headquarters. 4 years had transformed her life yet again. The triplets, now 11, had blossomed from precocious children into young prodigies. Williams Tech had evolved from a promising startup into a technological juggernaut valued at over $3 billion. "Ms. Williams, we're approaching the Midtown corridor," the pilot's voice crackled through her headset. "The Monroe building is coming up on your right. 60 floors, LEED certified, available for immediate corporate leasing." Zara nodded, studying the gleaming tower. "Circle it once more, please. I want to see the southern exposure." Her phone vibrated with a text from Maya, now her chief of staff. "Board members assembled, awaiting your arrival for acquisition vote." 7 minutes later, Zara strode into Williams Tech's current headquarters, occupying 3 floors of prime Manhattan real estate. The contrast between this space and her first one-room Brooklyn office never failed to give her a moment of vertigo. Glass walls, ergonomic workstations, and a team of over 200 employees had replaced water-stained ceilings and second-hand furniture. In the boardroom, 12 executives rose as she entered. The wall of windows behind them framed the city skyline like a living painting, a vista of possibilities. "Good morning," Zara began, taking her position at the head of the polished table. "Let's discuss the neuro-speech acquisition." For the next 2 hours, they debated the merits of acquiring the small but innovative AI startup whose technology complemented Williams Tech's core algorithm. Opposition came primarily from her CFO, who questioned the $20 million price tag. "Their valuation is inflated," he argued. "We could develop similar capabilities in-house for less." Zara leaned forward. "What NeuroSpeech offers isn't just technology, it's talent. 3 brilliant developers overlooked by larger companies because they didn't fit the expected mold." She paused. "With this acquisition, we gain not only their innovations, but minds that approach problems from angles others don't consider." The vote passed 8-4. As the room cleared, Zara remained contemplating the skyline. Her empire had been built piece by piece, each acquisition carefully chosen not merely for profit, but to create something undeniably significant. That afternoon, Zara's driver delivered her to Thomas Jefferson Science Magnet School, where a crowd had gathered for the National Robotics Competition Finals. She slipped into the auditorium, finding a seat just as Memphis's team took the stage. Her middle son stood confidently beside their creation, a robotic arm designed to assist stroke patients with rehabilitation exercises. At 11, Memphis already possessed mechanical intuition that university professors found remarkable. His team's presentation was flawless, their responses to the judges' questions articulate and precise. When Memphis was announced as the national champion, Zara's applause was among the most enthusiastic. She watched him accept the trophy with gracious poise, pride swelling in her chest. Later that evening, Zara's phone lit up with a notification from Scientific American's online platform. Youngest published author, Dallas Williams, 11, contributes groundbreaking article on neural network adaptability. She clicked through to find Dallas's paper, meticulously researched, elegantly argued, and already generating buzz in academic circles. The publication had made an exception to their age requirements after his submission underwent blind peer review and received unanimous approval. As for Boston, her eldest by 7 minutes had recently been accepted into MIT's exclusive summer program for exceptional young mathematicians, the only 11-year-old among participants predominantly in their late teens. The triplets' extraordinary achievements had become almost routine, yet Zara never took them for granted. Each milestone represented triumph over the circumstances of their birth, each success a quiet rebuttal to Jonathan's dismissal. The family's new home reflected their changed circumstances, a sprawling penthouse with panoramic views of Central Park. The living room alone was larger than their first Queens apartment. Boston had transformed one bedroom into a coding laboratory. Memphis maintained a workshop where half-built robots and engineering projects occupied every surface. Dallas had converted his walk-in closet into a miniature library, shelves bending under the weight of scientific journals. Zara's home office featured a wall of awards and recognitions, tangible proof of her journey from abandoned wife to technological visionary. Yet more meaningful was the adjacent wall covered with the boys' achievements, academic medals, competition trophies, and framed certificates. That month's Forbes magazine lay on her desk, her own image on the cover beneath the headline, "The Self-Made Billionaire Who Revolutionized Natural Language Processing, Zara Williams's Personal Fortune Estimated at $4.7 billion." The following week, Zara's assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Marcus Reynolds is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent." The name triggered immediate recognition. Marcus Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Innovations and Jonathan Blackwood's most formidable business rival. Their companies had been locked in competition for market share for over a decade. "Send him in," Zara instructed, curiosity overriding protocol. Marcus Reynolds entered with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. In his mid-50s, he carried himself with a predatory grace that had earned him the nickname the Shark of Silicon Alley. "Ms. Williams," he began, accepting her handshake, "your reputation precedes you. I've been following your work for years." "Interesting," Zara replied, gesturing toward a chair. "Since we've never crossed paths at industry events, I prefer observing from a distance before making contact." His smile revealed perfect teeth, particularly when I'm considering a proposition of mutual benefit. For the next hour, Marcus outlined a business proposition that grew increasingly intriguing. Reynolds Innovations sought a technological partnership with Williams Tech, combining her language processing expertise with his hardware innovations. "The Blackwood Enterprises is vulnerable," he explained, spreading market analysis reports across her desk. "Jonathan has overestimated his position in the technology market for years. His AI division has been hemorrhaging money on failed initiatives." Zara maintained a neutral expression. "Why would Blackwood's vulnerabilities concern me?" Marcus's eyes gleamed with knowing calculation. "Because I've done my research, Ms. Williams. Not many know about your past with Jonathan Blackwood, but I make it my business to understand the personal histories of potential partners." The air in the room seemed to thin. Zara's expression remained impassive, but her pulse quickened. "What exactly do you know?" "That 15 years ago, you were Zara Blackwood. That when you became pregnant with triplets, Jonathan divorced you and effectively abandoned his children." Marcus leaned forward. "That he told you that you were common enough, without sufficient ambition." Zara's fingers tightened imperceptibly around her pen. "My past is irrelevant to any business discussion." "On the contrary," Marcus countered smoothly, "it's entirely relevant to what I'm proposing. Jonathan Blackwood deserves to lose everything, just as he tried to do to you. And we can make that happen. Legally, ethically, and profitably." Zara stood, walking to the window. "My sons don't know who their father is, only that he abandoned us before they were born. And they never need to know the specifics," Marcus assured her. "But consider this. A strategic partnership between Reynolds Innovations and Williams Tech would create an entity powerful enough to acquire controlling interest in Blackwood Enterprises." He joined her at the window. "Imagine Jonathan's face when he realizes the woman he discarded now controls his family legacy. The children he rejected now own his birthright." Zara remained silent, watching the city below. The proposal appealed to a part of her she rarely acknowledged. The wounded young woman who still remembered the cold hospital room, the divorce papers, the platinum ring tossed into the trash. "I'll need to review the financials," she finally said, turning back to him. "And any arrangement would need to prioritize business logic over personal vendettas." "Of course," Marcus agreed, sliding a thumb drive across her desk. "All the relevant data is here. Take your time." That night, after the triplets had gone to bed, Zara spread architectural plans and legal documents across her dining table. The strategy taking shape was elegant in its simplicity, yet devastating in its potential impact. A series of seemingly unrelated stock purchases through shell companies, strategic talent acquisition from Blackwood's key divisions, patent challenges to their core technologies. The ultimate result: control of the company that had been Jonathan's birthright and singular focus. As she reviewed the documents, Zara felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring. Not just the satisfaction of success or the pride in her achievements, but something darker and more primitive. The prospect of justice, of consequences finally finding the man who had so callously discarded her and their children. That night, looking out at the city that now partially belonged to her, Zara finally allowed herself to contemplate something she had avoided for 15 years. Not just success, but justice. A reckoning that Jonathan Blackwood would never see coming. The first rays of morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Zara's penthouse, casting a golden glow across the polished marble floors. She stood motionless before the panoramic view of Manhattan, a city that had once seemed so hostile and unforgiving, now spread beneath her like a conquered kingdom. 15 years had transformed everything. The Williams Tech Tower now dominated the Park Avenue skyline, 50 floors of gleaming innovation crowned with her name in illuminated letters visible for miles. Today marked more than just another dawn. It was 2023, and the triplets had turned 15. No longer the fragile infants fighting for breath in hospital incubators, but brilliant young men on the cusp of extraordinary futures. And tonight was the Forum Economico de Manhattan at the Waldorf Astoria, where Zara would receive the presidency of the American Technology Association, the crowning achievement of her meteoric rise. "Ms. Williams?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Just confirming your schedule for today. Press conference at 10, investment committee lunch at noon, and tonight the Manhattan Economic Forum at the Waldorf Astoria, where you'll be inducted as president of the American Technology Association." Zara straightened the collar of her custom Armani suit, the fabric whispering against her skin. At 45, she maintained an impeccable physical presence, her natural hair now styled in a precise, elegant cut that framed features that had acquired a distinguished beauty with maturity. Nothing in her appearance or bearing suggested the desperate woman she had once been. "Have the boys confirmed their attendance?" Zara asked, checking her tablet. "Yes, all three. Boston is flying in directly from his NASA internship, and Memphis and Dallas are returning from the International Mathematics Competition in Tokyo. The company jet departed to collect them an hour ago." Zara smiled. Her sons, now brilliant 15-year-olds, were her greatest achievement. All had inherited her sharp intelligence and, thankfully, none of Jonathan's character. The young men didn't know their father, only that he was a businessman who had abandoned the family before their birth. Zara never mentioned his name, nor allowed bitterness to contaminate their upbringing. "The new Forbes issue arrived," her assistant added, placing the magazine on Zara's desk. The cover proclaimed, "Zara Williams, the tech queen who transformed Silicon Valley. Personal fortune estimated at $4.7 billion. Her phone chimed with Boston's ringtone. "Mom, we just landed," his voice came through, mature but still carrying traces of boyhood. "Memphis and Dallas won't stop bragging about their medals. Classic them, showing off." Zara laughed. "Tell them I'm proud of all three of you. I can't wait to see you at tonight's event." As she disconnected, Zara had no idea that fate was preparing an encounter that would shake the carefully constructed foundations of her new life. While preparing for the most important night of her career, she was unaware that Jonathan Blackwood, now CEO of Blackwood Enterprises and recently divorced from his third marriage, would also be attending the Economic Forum. Across town, in a tastefully appointed corner office overlooking Central Park, Jonathan Blackwood reviewed quarterly projections with increasing concern. At 52, time had been physically generous to him. Silver temples added a distinguished air to his naturally aristocratic features, and regular sessions with a personal trainer maintained his athletic build. But beneath the polished exterior, worry gnawed at him. Blackwood Enterprises had expanded considerably under his 14-year leadership as CEO, But increasing competition from more innovative technology companies had begun eroding their market share. The artificial intelligence division in particular had consumed massive resources with disappointing returns. "Mr. Blackwood," his assistant interrupted through the intercom, "just confirming your attendance at the Manhattan Economic Forum tonight. Your guest, Miss Parker, will meet you there." Jonathan absently adjusted his Brioni tie. "Yes, I'll be there. Make sure the car is ready at 7. After his assistant withdrew, he turned to the window, contemplating the empire his grandfather had built and his father had expanded. An empire that, for the first time in 3 generations, showed signs of vulnerability. The pressure to reverse the trend weighed heavily on him, especially after his recent divorce, his 3rd failed marriage in 15 years. None of his subsequent wives had given him children. Sometimes, in moments of rare introspection, Jonathan wondered about the 3 children he had rejected before their birth. He had blocked all information about Zara after their divorce, instructing his team never to mention her name. He assumed she had returned to her modest life in the Bronx, perhaps remarried, raising children who would never know his name. How wrong he was. At 6 that evening, the Williams penthouse buzzed with activity. 3 identical young men moved with the boundless energy of adolescence, adjusting ties and comparing notes on their recent achievements. "7 minutes earlier doesn't make you the boss, Boston," Memphis teased, polishing his international mathematics gold medal before carefully placing it around his neck. "Tell that to NASA," Boston replied with a grin. "The astrophysics director already offered me a position after graduation." Dallas, adjusting his glasses, interjected, "Technically, I've had the most academic citations this year, so intellectual superiority clearly belongs to me." Zara watched her sons with quiet pride. Tall, poised, with confident smiles, each wore the distinctive Blackwood nose and jawline, features that would soon become impossible for Jonathan to ignore. In her walk-in closet, Zara selected a perfectly tailored midnight blue silk suit, complemented by a single discreet piece of jewelry, a silver pendant containing a tiny photograph of the triplets as newborns, a constant reminder of her motivation. "This night," she said to her confident reflection in the mirror, "is the culmination of everything we've built." Meanwhile, Jonathan's penthouse presented a stark contrast, opulent but sterile, lacking the warmth of family photographs or personal touches. He dressed methodically, the routine familiar after countless similar events. Tonight was just another networking opportunity, another chance to reassure investors and intimidate competitors. He had no inkling that his carefully compartmentalized past was about to collide violently with his present. The grand salon of the Waldorf Astoria blazed with light from enormous crystal chandeliers. America's corporate elite circulated between champagne flutes and strategic conversations about the global economy's future. At the center of the room, Jonathan Blackwood displayed calculated charm while conversing with potential investors. "The AI sector is facing corrections, certainly," he acknowledged to a group of attentive listeners. "But Blackwood Enterprises is positioned to capitalize on the inevitable consolidation." "Mr. Blackwood, what an unexpected pleasure," approached Marcus Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Innovations and his greatest commercial rival. "I heard your artificial intelligence division continues, attempting to achieve success. Fascinating how some companies simply cannot innovate, isn't it?" Jonathan forced a smile. "Marcus, always so subtle. Perhaps you should worry less about my business and more about your cybersecurity problems. I heard about the recent breach. Regrettable." The event presenter ascended to the stage, interrupting the growing tension between the 2 executives. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that we announce the new president of the American Technology Association, a visionary who has revolutionized the sector with innovations that redefined how we interact with artificial intelligence. Please welcome the CEO of Williams Tech, Ms. Zara Williams." The room erupted in applause. Jonathan, distracted by his previous conversation, turned casually toward the stage, and then his world stopped. Zara Williams. The name hit him like a physical blow. Impossible. The elegant woman walking confidently to the stage couldn't be the same one he had discarded 15 years ago. But it was. The same penetrating eyes, now emanating a strength and confidence that had never been there before. "Thank you very much," Zara began, her clear, commanding voice naturally silencing the room. Technology has the power to elevate voices that have been systematically silenced. My mission at Williams Tech has always been to create tools that democratize opportunities. Jonathan remained paralyzed, the champagne flute forgotten in his hand. How could he not have known this? How had Zara Williams become such a prominent figure without him noticing? The answer was simple. After the divorce, he had completely blocked any mention of her, even instructing his team never to bring any information about his ex-wife. Before continuing, Zara proceeded, "I'd like to introduce 3 extraordinary young men who perfectly represent why we must invest in human potential. My sons, Boston, Memphis, and Dallas Williams." 3 identical 15-year-old young men ascended to the stage. Tall, with impeccable posture and confident smiles, each wore International Mathematics Olympiad medals around their necks. Jonathan felt his legs weaken. His own father's features, the distinctive Blackwood nose, the jawline, even the way the tallest of the 3 slightly tilted his head, were unmistakable. His sons, the sons he had denied. "Our mother taught us that our value doesn't come from who rejects us, but from who we choose to be," Boston declared at the microphone. Williams Tech was born in a small Queens apartment with 3 babies sleeping while she programmed. Today, our natural language processing algorithms are used by 67% of the world's largest companies. Memphis took the microphone. "Our new ethical AI platform, which will be officially announced tomorrow, redefines transparency standards in artificial intelligence, and yes, it has already been implemented in government systems across 5 countries. Dallas concluded, "As our mother would say, the sweetest success is the one nobody expected you to achieve." Zara's gaze swept the room and, as if drawn by magnetic force, found Jonathan. For a microsecond, there was a flash of recognition, but no reaction beyond that, as if he were just another face in the crowd. The presentation continued with screens displaying Williams Tech's impressive numbers: annual revenue of $3, $8 billion presence in 43 countries, market valuation exceeding $9 billion, significantly larger than Blackwood Enterprises. When Zara concluded her speech, enthusiastic applause echoed through the hall. She and the triplets descended from the stage, immediately surrounded by admirers and potential business partners. Jonathan observed from a distance, trying to process the monumental revelation. "Impressive, isn't it?" Marcus Reynolds' voice startled him. "Zara Williams, from poverty to billions in 15 years. They say she was abandoned by her husband when pregnant with triplets. What kind of monster would do that?" Marcus's eyes sparkled with malice. He knew. Somehow he knew the connection. "How did you?" "Oh, I did my homework, Jonathan. I always do, including on that natural language processing algorithm your company has been unsuccessfully trying to replicate. Fascinating how similar it is to the initial project Zara developed while she was your wife, isn't it? Projects you called a hobby without importance, from what I've heard." Jonathan felt the blood freeze in his veins. Marcus continued, relentless. "By the way, I'd like to announce that Reynolds Innovations and Williams Tech have just finalized a strategic merger. We're about to become the largest force in the country's technology sector." He smiled, poison in every word. "I think you should congratulate your ex-wife. Out of courtesy, you know. After all, you have history." With a nod, Marcus walked away, leaving Jonathan in a spiral of panic. Taking a deep breath, he crossed the room, approaching the group where Zara was animatedly conversing with investors. While the Williams family limousine drove to the Waldorf Astoria, none of the 4 could imagine that in the next few hours, past and present would collide with enough force to rewrite the future of 2 corporate dynasties. The grand salon of the Waldorf Astoria shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, a microcosm of power where America's business elite exchanged pleasantries that masked billion-dollar negotiations. Jonathan Blackwood felt the familiar comfort of belonging in this rarefied air, a world he'd inhabited since birth. He straightened his custom-tailored jacket, preparing to cross the room toward the cluster of investors surrounding Zara. Zara. His voice sounded strangely fragile in his own ears. "Could we speak?" She turned, and for the first time in 15 years, faced him directly. There was no hatred in her eyes, only a clinical coldness, like someone observing a curious specimen. "Jonathan Blackwood," she said calmly. What a surprise. He searched her face for traces of the young woman he'd discarded in that hospital room, finding none. The soft vulnerability had been replaced by chiseled confidence. Her simple black dress, which he recognized as a Chanel original, draped perfectly over her frame, worlds away from the second-hand clothes she'd once worn. "Could we speak privately, please?" The unfamiliar desperation in his tone surprised even him. One of the triplets, Memphis, according to his name badge, moved protectively closer to Zara. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Perfectly fine, sweetheart. This is Jonathan Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. An old acquaintance." Memphis extended his hand politely. "Pleasure, sir. I've heard your company is attempting to develop a system similar to our Atlas 3.0, without much success, according to last week's Financial Times." The comment, delivered with studied innocence, struck Jonathan like a knife. Zara's subtle smile confirmed the barb was intentional. "Jonathan, we're at an important event. Any business matters can be scheduled with my assistant." "It's not about business," he insisted, desperation transparent in his voice. "It's about us, about the past, about them." He gestured discreetly toward the young men. Zara glanced around, noticing the attention they were beginning to attract. 5 minutes. The East Terrace. The cool night air on the terrace provided brief respite from the suffocating tension. Manhattan spread before them, a glittering carpet of lights and possibilities. "Zara, I had no idea about your success, about the boys. They're incredible. They're my sons." "No," she cut in with surgical precision. "They are my sons. You abdicated any right to them when you handed me divorce papers in a hospital room and tossed your wedding ring in the trash." "I was young, stupid, pressured by family. I was 30, Jonathan. You were 37. We weren't teenagers. You made a conscious choice." Jonathan swallowed hard. "What do they know about me?" "Enough that their biological father chose his career over family. And now? Could I get to know them? Be part of their lives?" Zara's laugh was short and humorless. 15 years later, when they're internationally awarded geniuses, when they're about to enter Harvard, now you want to be part of their lives? The terrace door opened, revealing Marcus Reynolds and the 3 young men. "Ah, here you are," Marcus said. "Have you told him about our merger, Zara? Or about the investigation we're opening into how Blackwood Enterprises has been illegally using code similar to your original patents?" Understanding hit Jonathan like an avalanche. This wasn't coincidence. It was a meticulously planned trap. "You knew I would be here," he murmured to Zara. "All of this was planned." Zara smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Business is about strategy, Jonathan. You taught me that." Boston stepped forward, observing Jonathan with clinical curiosity. "So it's you, the man who said my mother was common enough. Interesting. Fortune magazine seems to disagree, considering she's been on their list of the 10 most influential CEOs for 3 consecutive years, while you never appeared on it," Dallas completed. "Fascinating, considering your pedigree." Memphis checked his smartwatch. "By the way, we just acquired 22% of Blackwood Enterprises shares through a subsidiary. Combined with those Mr. Reynolds already secretly owned, 51%, Marcus concluded with a predatory smile. Majority control. Effective as of now. Jonathan staggered, supporting himself against the terrace parapet. That's impossible. The family shares are protected. Were, Zara corrected softly. Until your recent restructuring to go public. A desperate move to inject liquidity, wasn't it? You should read the fine print of contracts more carefully, Jonathan. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. The declining market share, the strategic talent poaching, the mysteriously unsuccessful AI initiatives, all orchestrated to drive Blackwood Enterprises toward vulnerability. You've been planning this for years, he whispered. 15 years, to be precise, Marcus confirmed, swirling his champagne. Though I only joined the effort 5 years ago, Zara had already laid the groundwork beautifully. Boston studied Jonathan with the detached interest of a scientist observing a specimen. You know what's ironic? Your failure stems from exactly what you accused our mother of lacking: ambition. You were content to maintain the status quo, while she revolutionized an entire industry. Our algorithm, Memphis added, the one you dismissed as her hobby without importance, now powers systems in 83 countries, including, as of next quarter, all Blackwood Enterprises platforms, Dallas concluded with a smile that mirrored his mother's. We're implementing a complete systems overhaul. Jonathan felt the world tilting beneath his feet. You can't just take over my company. Not your company, Zara corrected. Your grandfather's company, which you inherited rather than built. And yes, we can. The board votes tomorrow to confirm new leadership. I'll fight this, Jonathan said, desperation edging his voice. My family has connections. So do we, Boston interrupted. More relevant ones, actually. The technological ecosystem has evolved beyond the old networks your father cultivated. Silicon Valley respects innovation more than legacy. Marcus checked his watch. The press release goes out at midnight. Blackwood Enterprises under new management. Rather poetic, isn't it? The weight of 15 years of dismissive arrogance crashed down on Jonathan's shoulders. The empire he'd been born to command, slipping through his fingers like sand. And worse, the realization that the woman he'd once deemed common enough had orchestrated his downfall with elegant precision. Why now? He managed. After all these years? Zara considered him for a moment. The timing was strategic. Your company became vulnerable, yes. But more importantly, I wanted our sons to witness this moment, to understand that no one can define their worth but themselves. Boston, Memphis, and Dallas stood tall beside their mother, 3 identical faces bearing the unmistakable Blackwood features, yet with Zara's determined eyes. 3 living reminders of the legacy Jonathan had rejected. You told me I lacked sophistication, Zara continued, her voice controlled, that I didn't have the necessary connections, that I was common enough. Each word became fuel, every insult transformed into determination. Memphis stepped forward. Mom built Williams Tech while working 3 jobs and raising us alone. The first office was our living room. The first investors laughed her out of meetings, but she persisted. Meanwhile, Dallas added, Blackwood Enterprises has lost market share every quarter for the past 7 years. Your innovations stagnated. Your leadership faltered. The business world isn't sentimental, Boston concluded. It rewards vision and punishes complacency. This acquisition isn't personal, it's mathematical. But the gleam in Marcus's eyes suggested otherwise. Though the personal element does add a certain satisfaction, doesn't it? Jonathan straightened his spine, grasping for the dignity that had always been his birthright. I'll still be a shareholder. The Blackwood name will remain, Zara assured him. We're not vindictive, Jonathan. The company retains its name, and you retain a minority stake. You'll even have a position on the board, though without executive authority. This calculated mercy somehow cut deeper than complete destruction would have. She wasn't even angry enough to want him erased, merely diminished, controlled, and forced to watch her ascendancy from a subordinate position. "The boys," he began, looking at the three young men, "are not part of this negotiation," Zara stated firmly. "They know who you are now. What relationship, if any, they choose to have with you is entirely their decision." Memphis glanced at his brothers, then back at Jonathan. "Perhaps we can discuss that at another time. Tonight is about business." As they turned to re-enter the gala, Boston paused. "One more thing. Mom never told us how you abandoned her, or what you said. We discovered it ourselves, through research. Your hospital visit, the divorce papers, the ring in the trash, it's all documented. We wanted to understand where we came from, to appreciate where we're going." The door closed behind them, leaving Jonathan alone on the terrace with the bitter night air and the realization that his life had just fundamentally changed. While Jonathan staggered under the weight of revelation, supporting himself against the terrace parapet, he still couldn't fully comprehend that dawn would bring not only the loss of his company, but the public collapse of the entire identity he had built at the expense of the woman who now orchestrated his fall. Manhattan awoke to a transformed business landscape. Jonathan Blackwood's face appeared on every major financial outlet. Fall of an empire, Blackwood Enterprises under new control. CEO Jonathan Blackwood removed after hostile takeover. Williams and Reynolds, the merger that changed the game. The morning light felt harsh and unforgiving as Jonathan stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Overnight, lines had deepened around his eyes, and the confident set of his jaw had slackened. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since the press release went live at midnight, but he'd silenced it hours ago, unable to face the questions, the pity, the schadenfreude that would inevitably color every conversation. At the corporate tribunal in downtown Manhattan, the cold marble reflected the lights as lawyers finalized the details of the power transfer. Jonathan sat alone at one end of the long conference table, feeling strangely detached as his family legacy slipped through his fingers. "The documents confirm unauthorized use of intellectual property," Zara's lawyer announced, sliding folders across the polished surface. "Algorithms developed by Ms. Williams during her marriage were incorporated into Blackwood systems without proper attribution or compensation." The evidence was damning: snippets of code, dated development logs, even emails Jonathan had forgotten he'd sent dismissing Zara's work as inconsequential tinkering. Now, that same tinkering powered systems worth billions, while Blackwood's attempted replications had repeatedly failed. His lawyer leaned close, whispering urgently, "We should consider settlement options. Fighting this would be costly and likely unsuccessful." Jonathan nodded numbly. The irony wasn't lost on him. 15 years ago, he'd pressured Zara to sign papers while she lay vulnerable in a hospital bed. Today, he found himself similarly cornered, with significantly less grace. When his phone vibrated with a message from Alessandra, the 26-year-old model he'd been dating for the past 3 months, he wasn't surprised by its content. "Need to cancel tonight. Suddenly swamped with work. Good luck with everything." The digital abandonment was swift and predictable. Rats fleeing a sinking ship. His apartment on Park Avenue, once a sanctuary of privilege, now felt like a museum of hubris. Calls from friends and associates went unanswered, all suddenly too busy to offer support. The social circle that had seemed so solid had evaporated instantly with his change in fortune. In her temporary office at Williams Tech headquarters, Zara reviewed contracts with Marcus when a notification appeared on her tablet. "Jonathan is requesting a private meeting," she informed, no emotion in her voice. "Says it's about the boys." Marcus frowned. "You owe him nothing." "This isn't about debts," she replied calmly. "It's about closure." The Williams Tech conference room where they met hours later embodied minimalist elegance, a stark contrast to the ornate traditional styling of Blackwood's boardrooms. Jonathan entered expecting to find only Zara, but instead encountered all 3 triplets, seated side by side with identical expressions of distant curiosity. "Thank you for seeing me," he began hesitantly. "I didn't expect you to be here," he said to the young men. "Our mother consulted us," Boston replied. "We decided we wanted to hear what you have to say." Jonathan nodded, gathering courage. "First, I want you to know that what I did 15 years ago was unforgivable. I abandoned your mother when she needed me most. I abandoned you before even knowing you." "Why?" Memphis asked directly. The simple question hit Jonathan with unexpected force. "I was afraid of failing as a father, of not meeting my family's expectations, afraid that having children would compromise my position in the company." "So you chose status over people," Dallas concluded. "Yes, and it was the greatest mistake of my life." Zara observed silently, allowing her sons to conduct the conversation they never had the chance to have. "What do you want from us now?" Boston was direct to the point. "Our surnames are Williams. Legally, we have no connection to you." "I'm not asking to be your father," Jonathan replied, surprising everyone. "I forfeited that right. I just want you to know that I deeply regret my actions, and that I'm proud of the extraordinary men you've become, thanks to your mother." Zara finally spoke. "We appreciate your honesty, Jonathan. But understand, we didn't build our lives waiting for this moment. There isn't a father-shaped void waiting to be filled." "I understand." He swallowed hard. "About the company." "Blackwood Enterprises will continue to exist," Zara clarified. "Under new management, obviously. Your minority participation remains intact. You won't be completely divested." "Why? You could destroy me completely." A slight smile touched Zara's lips. "Because this isn't about revenge, Jonathan. It never was. It's about justice and building something meaningful." She paused. "Besides, completely destroying you would require me to care much more about you than I ever will again." The calculated indifference of that declaration was more devastating than any direct attack could have been. In the weeks that followed, the restructuring of Blackwood Enterprises proceeded efficiently. Jonathan, removed from the CEO position, maintained a consultative role, a concession that surprised the market but which Zara simply explained as good business practice. In his new apartment, significantly smaller than his former penthouse, Jonathan found an unexpected delivery, a box containing 3 photo albums documenting crucial moments from the triplets' first 15 years of life. Accompanying it was a simple card with Zara's elegant handwriting. "These are the moments you chose to miss. They cannot be recovered, but they may serve as a reminder of the cost of your choices. Zed." By late summer, the triplets departed for Harvard, Boston for theoretical physics, Memphis for biomedical engineering, and Dallas for computer science. Jonathan watched the media coverage of the Williams prodigies arriving on campus, feeling a mixture of pride and profound regret. In her office at Williams Tech, Zara was finalizing negotiations to expand the company into Asian markets. Her empire now valued at more than $15 billion, nearly triple Blackwood Enterprises at its peak. On her desk, among awards and prototypes, sat a small photograph of the newborn triplets in the hospital, her moral compass throughout these years. Marcus entered with a champagne bottle after signing the Asian contract. "A toast to the most formidable woman I've ever met," he proposed. "You got everything you wanted." Zara shook her head, smiling. "No, Marcus. I got everything I needed, and I built everything I wanted, by myself." From her office window, she observed the Manhattan skyline, the city that once made her feel small and insignificant, the same city that now bowed to her empire built with relentless determination. Somewhere down there, Jonathan Blackwood faced the consequences of his choice made 15 years ago, not just the loss of status and power, but the irreparable emptiness of never truly knowing the extraordinary sons he rejected. Meanwhile, Zara Williams had transcended the narrative of the abandoned woman. This wasn't a story of revenge, but of triumph, not about retaliation, but reconstruction, not about the man who left her, but about the woman she chose to become. And that, she realized with quiet satisfaction, was the true victory. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.